We are on the road, as you can see from our background. So we will proceed a little early this time. Welcome to Evolution Hour, the 20th of July. Earlier than I've been getting on lately, but such is life. And there we have Troubles in Paradise, etc., so on and so forth. As you can see from my background, I am not in Spokane. I'm with our bunch in Seattle. My great-grandniece's 5th birthday is coming up, so I'm over here for that. But we are continuing with our cute little titans. And we have the virtue that the part 2 is functionally the other half of our part 1 because they're all talking about exactly the same thing. The Titans book was making a big deal about, oh, hello, Lisa. There we go. Got somebody online. I'm starting up early this week for reasons that I'm in Seattle and away we go. And that way I don't have to keep everybody up quite so late here. There have been issues about floating ankylosaurs, bloat and float model that could account for why certain ankylosaurs are showing up the way they are. Those are those big armored dinosaurs with the club tails and all that kind of stuff from the Cretaceous as to why they're getting preserved. And it happens that Sarfati and Tay, bless their little hearts, and a completely independent creationist, Andrew Lamb in 2019, both lit on to the same little point. I won't be able to put the links in on everything until I get back from our trip here. But the Andrew Lamb post, I'll be putting a link up to. That was from 2019. And we'll also be putting a link up to not merely the Mallon paper, but to a few more besides. One of the things that's very interesting is that in this paper, which is one of the reasons why Sarfati and Tay are screwing it up, and so are Andrew Lamb, is in that Mallon paper, there's a huge catalog of these various preserved ankylosaurs, and they're going into whether or not they all fall into this bloat and float model or not. And therein lies the fun and games, because it turns out any attempt to try to attribute all of this stuff to the flood ain't going to work. The paper's content got in the way. So one of the 36 specimens studied, none of them were full body fossils. So the flood scenario where they're landing in one fell swoop and getting preserved spectacularly, nope, none of that qualifies. The paper noted that all were in river channel depositional contexts. Again, if this were the big slosh where things could be washed off. Worse, number 3, the examples they were dealing with in the specific Aeolian settings. Okay, unexpectedly device. Oh, okay, our timer is running again. Whoops. In Aeolian sand deposits where none of them got inverted. So there are ankylosaurs that are preserved, and they're not odd. So they're citing a paper from 1999 by Lupi et al., which I'll be putting a link up to when I get back to Spokane, and on lethal sand dune slides, and Curie et al. 2011 on a Mongolian fossil that are clearly not falling into the flood scenario. So it's an interesting example of, let's see what he's from, the Lamb pieces from Creation Ministries International, which is the same ballpark as the Sarfati and Tay book. Let me look into that just to see, are they going to be cribbing Lamb because he's CMI? Let me look through my little blips in here, and I don't see anything popping up in the front. Nope, I don't think they managed to do it. So they're kind of independently pouncing, or drew on Lamb for the paper and then never thought to actually make a mention of where it's from. I got a little kitty that's wandering around my viewport here in the back bedroom that used to be the Montessori school, Ash, that's still trying to explore what's going on. So if by some weird circumstance a small kitty jumps up onto the screen, then we will know what the heck is going on. So I plead total chaos here in Seattle. So this is a perfectly fine example of a Trojan source where the creationists are quite objectively citing a technical paper that blows to smithereens the arguments they're trying to make. And worse, that there's information further on in the paper that makes that even worse. So how did kangaroos only end up in Australia, and why aren't there any fossils along the way? Yeah, that's a really funky one. You get a very slight bit of creationist apologetics on kangaroos. There's some fossil kangaroos that are from or super duper ancestors of them, rare examples outside of the usual context, but they're ancestral forms. All of the forms that are known from actual kangaroos are in that Australian context. And that biogeography issue is a disaster for creationism. So it's not a topic that gets addressed other than to kind of flip it off to think that, well, they can calculate how far critters are going and come up with some numbers. They're also very vague about what the pre-flood, post-flood environment looked like. They're kind of typically settling in, at least at AIG and ICR crowd, that the plate movements are shifting through the Pangea world to arrive at the version that we have. So mountain ranges are being thrown up and continents are being moved around and all that. That is also further complicating the whole issue of how they're dealing with the biogeographical transfer of critters down to Australia. But you have the same problems functionally with the endemic fauna on islands in general, which is not a topic that gets covered a hell of a lot. In that. The favorite one, I think we alluded to it way on an episode back, and it's been deleted from, hi, Brian. It's been deleted from the old, I think it was on Creation Wiki, or maybe it had been on Conservapedia. But anyway, somebody was suggesting back, I think around 2009, that koalas got shot in volcanic eruptions that landed them in Australia. That scenario didn't really fare even well in the creationist scenario, and it was still kept online for quite a while. And the last time I looked, it was deleted. So they apparently decided that that one wasn't going to wash. But yeah, the fossil material, Christine Janis, the mammal paleontologist who loves evolution slam dunk, which I would be pointing to over my shoulder if I were back home in my den, has done some material on the range of early kangaroo forms. There's an awful lot going on in the fossil record of what was happening in that environment. It's just not stuff that gets tough typically in the creationist scenario. And of course, we've also got the wonderful world of current news. The toadies in what used to be the Republican Party have passed the rescission that is eliminating some aid, including some money for public broadcasting, which our local channels will probably be able to maneuver around that. But there are a lot of areas in rural zones that are going to be hit really hard by this, some of whom are in bloody red states. So it's going to be an interesting mess to see what's going on. And although they've got like, what, $9 billion in the rescission, that's really not going to help much for the trillion plus in increases to the deficit because of the continuation of the stupid Trump tax cuts, which go primarily, 75% of which go to people up at the top, including presumably quite a few of the people that are in his billionaire cabinet. So all of that's going to be stuff everybody wants to keep in mind when the reckoning comes after the bad effects of the Trump economic policies really start hitting in over the next year. From the tariffs that he's obsessed with. His brain is stuck in 1970. And then also the immigration policy, the deportations and the like that didn't help in 1930. They didn't help in the 1950s. And they're not going to be helping now. So It's going to be some interesting little experiments, but we want to make sure that the smiley faces that passed all this mess bear the brunt of it. That although Trump will try to blame everybody but himself for everything that goes wrong, we've got to make absolutely certain that there's no doubt that no, it's going wrong because of Trump policies, and that this was not the case prior to Trump bullshits that the economy under Biden was the worst ever and the economy was crashing. No, it wasn't. And I can remember beyond that, my gosh, poor Ronald Reagan would have had a thrill to have run on an economy as strong as Biden had. So I think it's kind of sad that Biden wasn't getting enough credit for how adroit all of that was. They got a rat in a yellow submarine with some hippies in a van. Cuckoo, cuckoo. Yeah. Yes. Well, there's going to be, there's an awful lot of reckonings to go on. How much foreign policy issues will be hitting into the field? It's kind of hard to say. Everything is up in the air. I can only kind of project ahead about what's going to be likely to be happening on the economic front, because never have I seen a suite of policies this inept. Plus, they're cutting the safety net that is clawing back on the capacity of the economy to withstand problems, which is one of the reasons why some of the bad policies that have been instituted in previous administrations would only generate recessions. But I think Trump's going to outdo Hoover and bring us out to a full-blown depression because we've got way too many bad circumstances, festering long-term things on housing, healthcare, income inequality, and all of that. That's been in need of redress for quite a long time and in need of a progressive reform period. We probably should have broken up the larger banks after the 2008. So there's a lot of reforms that are going to have to be done, and we can absolutely guarantee that the Trumpistas are not going to be doing it. So you're going to have a groundswell, assuming we still have elections, to vote these nincompoops out and to point to the bad effects of things, saying, however much you thought this was a good idea, it's objectively not a good idea. So there we go on that. And yes, I agree with you, Brian, on this. This is very dire times that we're looking at. I'm thinking we are presently in our 1929. And so it's going to be an interesting bump through our 1930, 31, 32. But look what happened in the previous time. You had a tremendous change in the sea from 1928 to 1932. And we can theoretically have exactly the same kind of range today. Plus, we have the advantages of improved technology, communication systems, and the like. But the main point is that we've got to hold all the nincompoops accountable and don't let them try to bullshit their way around it. On our Rocks for There Volume 2, I just finished up the material. In fact, Jackson was quizzing me because he wants me to get through to the next chapter, the Noah's Lost World chapter that he's contributed his part on, and I still have to put in material on whales and Grand Canyon and all that stuff with the Paleo World's material. But I got to finish the cosmology chapter. And so I've finished up the solar system or star galaxy end of things. All the anthropic stuff is straightened out. And now I'm moving into working out the background on solar system formation, asteroids, comets, things like that. That relate to how creationists are mishandling that information. And then there's a little weirdness in some of the little side bits that we'll be bringing up regarding Kent Hovind. The Hovind theory is going to get a discussion. And some of the little weird Hovind notions that have been popping around in the bit. The Lost Squadron is a thing that he was particularly fond of, although it popped up in a lot of other creationist lore. The Missing Second bit supposedly about how fast the Earth was slowing down. There's a whole bunch of little sidebars and stuff that we'll get out of the way on. So anyway, it's going to be a real whiz bang of a book. And we hope to get that in gear. I'm hoping to finish off all of that cosmology material by next month. And that means we swing into the other stuff. I've still got the Ark Encounter chapter to coordinate. That'll be a major addition to the literature, I think, because it's the first time there will be a complete breakdown of all the little kinds that are supposedly on the Ark, according to the Ark Encounter. And although they've got a list at the museum, they don't publicize, provide any documentation on it on their websites. And when we look into it, this will probably be easily explained why they don't want to go into details on that. Oh, what's the Hovind theory? Yes, Hovind has a kind of warmed over version of the old ice canopy idea that's creationism from the 60s, 70s. He thinks that there was some big cloudy, icy comedy thing that came through and that was brought down for the flood and produced the asteroid belt and comets and a whole bunch of things that goes on. He's never been particularly detailed on the thing, even within his own apologetics. I mean, he could self-publish his stupid theory if he wanted, but he keeps alluding to it over decades and kind of waving it and then running on. So there's not a great deal of substance to it, but what little he has discussed over the years suggests that it is plain claptrap in terms of trying to explain anything. There's a lot of weird little lore that has gotten kind of downplayed in current creationist apologetics. The lunar dust story has pretty much been put to rest. Creationists up at the upper echelon don't use it anymore, but yet you find lower echelon creationists that are riffing off of older material, popping it up. One of the little miscellaneous items that'll get a mention in the book is one that Henry Morris was pushing around in the early 1970s, that the lunar craters were formed when St. Michael was having a battle with Satan, and there were lightning bolts hitting the moon. I'm not making this up. This was the argument that he was giving. Needless to say, that one disappeared in a hurry from the ICR lore, and I don't think many have drawn on it since. It was in the little pamphlet book that he did that was being given out freebies back in the 1970s, and which is why I have a copy of it. The Amazing Birth of Planet Earth, I think it was called. And so this issue of how creationists are revamping their material and sweeping under the rug. There's quite a few examples of that we're going to be detailing in the cosmology chapter. Bits about, for example, the how many supernovas there are, and whether or not there are too few supernovas visible supposedly if the universe were billions of years old. It's incorrect, but it was a thing that was being popularized in the 80s and so on, and 90s, including by Danny Faulkner. Hard to say what the actual theory is, but considering the source most likely can be genuinely classified as turd. Yes, that's a pretty good bit with Kent Hovind. As I pointed out before, Kent Hovind is the Donald Trump of creationism. And although he has a very pompous sense of his own importance, he's absolutely trivial in the professional, and there are professional young earth creationists. There's people that have the actual degrees, not the fake stuff like Kent Hovind. They may not be doing videos as relentlessly as Hovind or his son Eric are. Eric has kind of detached himself from daddy and moved on over to the crowds circulating around ICR, AI, GCMI. And he's been doing various puff pieces in that regard. He's no better at it. He's still a secondary source addict, basically repeating tropes that he hears from other people. And to some extent, at least in his earlier lectures, Apologia had spotted this some time back, and we'll be alluding to it in the new book too, how he would just parrot his dad's speeches and recycle them, and he would be delivering the same patter that his father was. And he glommed on, of course, when daddy went into the slammer. Eric took the postings, big chunks of them that Kent had, and simply retooled and stuck his name on them, sometimes forgetting to make detail changes where the text is referring to Hovind's own thing, Kent's stuff. So anyway, sloppiness, but Eric is not exactly the most detailed and attentive person. He's more personable and less blatantly annoying as Kent, but still maintains the same claptrap. So we'll be documenting all of this transition and evolution of the small body of creationist apologetics. There's only about 4 or 5 people that are the main players there. Russell Humphreys, who's still knocking around, but most of his ideas have been rendered implausible even by the other creationists. And then you've got John Hartnett and Jason Lyle. He's the guy with the tweaking speed of light stuff. and Danny Faulkner. And then there is a few little sidebar people floating around there on the edges. Faulkner is the most interesting on the revisionist front in that he has been moving the goalposts on lots of issues, basically chiding his fellow creationists for not accepting the reality of dark matter, dark energy, galactic expansion, and all of that stuff. Not that he has a good explanation for any of this stuff himself. He keeps jumping from one thing to another and tidying up some of the mistakes that they make by simply ignoring them. But he's an interesting example of that. Whereas you've got the more doctrinal ones that are just pushing the same issue over and over again. The thing that will be very clear from our analysis of the answers books is how they've jumped each of like 4 different answers books covering quite a few decades roughly, are all written by different people. And they keep jumping from one authority figure to the next and dropping the older material and kind of sliding in some new ones, and typically only one main chapter per book. So given how spectacularly enormous the data field is, how big the universe is, how big of a topic, the fact that they devote so little attention to it in the answers books is yet another indication of how they don't really have much of an argument going on this. So anyway, yeah, the Hovind theory. Hovind has a lot of little quibbly hot sidebars. One of the things that he's brought up that we'll be alluding to is his claim that you can't physically measure the distance of stars out past, I think one number he was giving was just 100 light years, which if this were 1890, that might be true, but it's not 1890. And you could measure things out way farther than that just from terrestrial telescopes. But because of the twinkling of the atmosphere and all of that, it was difficult to measure the very tiny parallaxes until you, of course, get space travel. So the space telescopes are quite a different matter. And it's possible to measure precise direct parallax out to about 100,000 light years. Not as far to get out to distant galaxies, but still way beyond the load limit of a young Earth creationist model. So any attempt to try to squeeze the universe down or make the phenomena go away isn't going to work. So now they have to figure out that all of that billions of years is real, but maybe time goes differently in other sections of the universe, so we can keep the 6-day creation here. It has incredible messes on its own in terms of trying to make sense out of all that stuff, but got to give them A for effort. You give them an F for the actual result, but an A for effort. So anyway, that will keep us going on material. Thanks for everyone who came in on this shortened earlier show. Let me remember to thank our Patreons with our weird screwed up picture from the website here. I can't get it to not lop off the color on there, but thanks for all of our colleagues and researchers and assistant researchers and friends and legacy patrons over the years. You can't do it without you, kids. And then we put up our little advert for The Rocks Were There, Volume 1. I'm presuming that we will be doing some comparable thing as an advertisement for the second book once that's done. Peter will probably come up with a really nice little video, and we'll hopefully get some nice adverts on Pelagia and various other people. We'll cross all that bridges once we get the new book done. And we are certainly pleased with the reaction that we've got on the book from the people who make use of it. That's everybody from Dapper Dino to Dan Stern Cardinale, Vice Rhino. They've all done us call outs on their various venues about how they have drawn on the book and rely on it as a source data field. It's something that Jackson and I are immensely proud of, and we will be even prouder of Volume 2 because it's even juicier than Volume 1. So, everybody, if you're in climate concerns or any of the other mucky things that can be afflicting people all over the place, stay careful and cool and calm and stay out of trouble and avoid incurring debt load. It's just in case the economy collapses, etc., and so forth. Watch out for the wooden penguins. And we will be seeing you all next week. Presumably by then I will be back in Spokane and we'll be able to get the links in on this video and be back on next week. Of course, will be another Casey Luskin show where, spoiler alert, it's really unlikely that there's going to be any papers that are going to be helping their case. But who knows? Hope springs eternal. So everybody stay safe and we will see you all next week.